Tonight, I'm very happy to welcome our friend, actress, singer, writer, right now podcaster, Cynda Williams from the United States. How are you, Cynda? Nice to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here with you.
Okay, Cynda was very kind to provide us like a very detailed interview about her career, about her beginnings, about her family, her parents, and then her family right now, and also her new projects beside film and television, her writing projects, and right now the radio show, the podcast. Before any question, I want to ask you, how can people discover your podcast? It is on a special website or, very known in on the United States?
It's actually on the primary platform is called anchor.com, but it's also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and iTunes and quite a few more podcasts that I'd never heard of. So it's on about 7 or 8 different platforms. But if you put PPC podcast with Cynda Williams, you can usually find me on most. I don't think it's on iTunes yet, but it is definitely on Spotify, Apple, and Anchor.
Yeah, so it's easy. If I write Cinda Williams, I will find it.
Yes, yes.
Tell me, what do you discuss there? It's and how long is the show? Because I never heard it.
Sure. It is a very quick experience because I'm educating many people that don't know anything about podcasts, especially people of color in America, United States. Black people, Hispanic people aren't really podcast savvy yet. So I wanted to do a podcast that was short and to the point. If it's something I'm doing solo, it can be 8 minutes at most, 8 to 10 minutes. And then if I have a guest, it might be 15 to 20 minutes at the longest. It's a self-help podcast, but I'm talking to all kinds of people about how they cope in different areas of their life. And it can be anyone. Like, for instance, next week's podcast is I'm interviewing a, a guy named Damian Swaby, who is a filmmaker in the UK. And he did a documentary about people of color dealing with mental health issues in the UK. And I found that that was very different perspective than American Black people. But the one way that we were similar is that people of color have a tendency to not seek out help that way. And there's a stigma on it. So we just talk about different things to help people feel better and hopeful and more positive in their lives, taking a different look at things in different, like this week, I talk about coping mechanisms for all the things that are happening in the world today. There's a lot of things that cause fear and anxiety. And I've recognized that a lot of my friends that are typically very peaceful people are agitated and not sleeping well. And so I run through some of the things that I do to cope that keep me positive. And I think it's helping people. That's my primary reason to do this platform, is because I feel like the acting and the singing and all of that just gives me a way to be able to communicate to people and help them.
Very good. And I want to ask you, really right now, when I say radio or podcast, me, like maybe 30 years ago, I used to listen to the radio early morning, the FM shows, and also people who are working as drivers, either trucks or taxis, radio and podcast may be very popular, But right now, I think also people can listen to podcasts with their cell phone and tablets. So, listening is quite still popular right now.
it's becoming even more popular for a wider group of people. I think for me, I listen to podcasts because sometimes I get enough of music. I love music, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I want to hear conversations and learn new information because it helps me in my personal life. So when I lived in Los Angeles and I traveled a lot, that's what I listened to. I listened to talk radio because it almost feels like you're in the conversation. And sometimes you are. You can call in and talk to the people. And eventually, when I'm doing my radio show, I'd like that to be a part of it so people can call in and ask questions if I have an expert. And so I think it's especially these days when you're contained in your own home and you may or may not have someone there with you. Maybe your children are working, maybe your partner's gone, maybe your partner's at home, but you're doing your separate things. Sometimes it's a way to have a conversation and hear thoughts from people, so you're not so lonely even. And I just think that people are doing it more and more.
I want to have a little, very fast flashback with you, asking you about One False Move and More Better Blues, because you work in two very important films, and sometimes films get also importance when times pass by, you know. So maybe some film is not well received box office or critics wise, and then it gets some rereading and re-watched. So tell me very fast, how did you get cast in these two films? Because until now, people still discussing them everywhere.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Mo Better Blues was my first film. I moved from Muncie, Indiana. I was living in Muncie, Indiana, a small Midwestern town, studying theater. I was a theater major, and I moved to I moved to New York to become a Broadway actress. I'm a musical theater person, and I thought that's what I was going to do. But at the time, Spike Lee was extremely popular from Do the Right Thing, and he was doing this movie on jazz, which no one expected from him. So quite a few people in the city were like, you need to audition for this movie. He is looking for, and hasn't found yet, a woman, not necessarily from an urban area, that's a singer and an actress, and you fit the role. So long story short, I went in, even though I'd never done a movie audition in my life. And I presented myself, and they liked what they heard and what they saw. And after 6 weeks, I finally got the role. And that was a nice open door for me as a singer and an actress. Although to this day, many people don't know that it was me singing. It did open the doors for me. I walked through the acting door more so than the singing door because I didn't really like the music business very well. And they were trying to push me towards singing jazz, which it was just a role that I played. I wasn't a jazz singer. I'd never sung jazz before that point. And really, that's more of a popular song versus a jazz song anyway. But it was in a jazz movie. So that was the audience that many studios wanted to push me towards. One False Move was, I auditioned for that around the time that I was doing publicity for Mo Better Blues. I'd come to Los Angeles where the auditions were. And while I was in LA, they're like, there's this movie you really got to go in for, my new agents. And so while I was in town, I went in, I auditioned. I thought it was one of the best scripts I'd ever read. And to be honest with you, the script that ended up we shot was very different from the original script. The original one, I had a lot more to say. The characters were flushed out a whole lot more. It ended up getting pared down, which is probably good, but it was the best role I'd ever read for myself, and probably to date one of the best roles ever. And so when I went back to New York, I studied, I prepared, just in case I got a call back, which I did. A couple of months later, I went back for the premiere of Mo Better Blues and had my second audition for One False Move and got it. So that's how I got those two.
Yes, and I remember since then, Bill Paxton, had many films role. He used to work, between independent and major films with a great flexibility and talent as well.
Yes, yes. Both of those films, so many people became huge stars, primarily the men. Unfortunately, the work that's available to women, especially women of color, for a very long time was rare. You could be the flavor of the month and work all the time and you'd see no other faces. But with men, there was a lot more opportunities. And I'm very proud of Giancarlo Esposito, John Turturro, Nikki Turturro, Samuel Jackson, Wesley Snipes, of course, Denzel. There are just so many people that came from Mo Better, and then Bill Paxton, Billy Bob Thornton. Their careers exploded. And Michael Beach, he's still working, doing his thing. He's a phenomenal actor. So those two films made some stars.
You told me that your daughter want to follow your footsteps in acting and singing. I want to ask you, what does she says when she sees the two films with you?
Well, she, believe it or not, she saw One False Move first because though there were a couple of moments that were quite a bit for a young child, that movie was being played all the time, and I was constantly on the road to represent that film. So she got to see it when she was pretty young, and it affected her because she believed the characters. I mean, she knew technically that these are actors, but she felt it was very realistic, and I think that it was impressive, and she really liked the fact that there was a young child in it and that she could relate to that child in One False Move. Mo Better Blues, she's only recently seen. She just turned 19, and I was always hesitant to show her the R-rated movies, some of the R-rated movies that I'd done. But a couple of years ago, a school was raising money, a high school was raising money in Chicago, and asked me if I would sing with a jazz band, which was a very well-known jazz band in the region, and they would play the movie to raise funds for the jazz band. And I was all for that because I love children and want to do what I can to help them. So that's when my daughter came, and she came with her boyfriend and her best friend. So that was a lot for me to bear. I wouldn't sit with them while they watched the film. But for the first time since I'd seen the film originally, I actually enjoyed it, because when I first saw it, I was so thrown by the experience of seeing myself on a large screen like that. And there were a lot of things that were missing from the movie that I thought were going to be there, things that were cut about my characters. So I wasn't in love with the movie for a long time, but this time watching it with my, a few seats away from my child and watching their experience, I saw how people loved the movie, and she did. She really enjoyed it. She thought it was very funny at times, and she had a good time, and so did her friends.
Spike Lee came here to Egypt and shot part of Malcolm X with Denzel Washington later on. And what I would like to ask you, two things related to that. First, about women roles, either for colored women, African American, Latino, etc. Because you started in the 90s, and right now, following the American media, there are a lot of changes regarding the writing and also the casting and also the settings, everything related to production, cinema and television.
Right.
But for me, following the news of production of American cinema, on the other hand, I followed the social media you know, YouTube especially, you know, and a lot of YouTubers, you know, they accuse the current production of being woke, you know, this expression, you know.
Mm.
So, and even for me as a viewer from another country, like I saw this year, Watchmen, you know, the television series in HBO. Mm?
Mhm.
And it was accused of being woke. Although I watched it, I think it was a very, very good piece of science fiction, you know, which is related to many topics going on in the United States. It was not a virtual universe, you know. So I want to ask you, what do you think happening right now, being the changing and the accusation? Where are we standing right now?
Well, I usually when things are evolving and shifting, uh, a lot of things that people don't like, they see for the first time or they start talking about for the first time. So there's been issues with representation for a very long time. But my thought always was the reason why we didn't have representation, women, especially women of color, definitely, was because we weren't doing the productions ourselves. I've recently been involved in a couple of productions, a couple of movies which I think are going to be very good. But they were written by men. They were written by Black men specifically, and their perspective of women is different than my perspective might be. So I had to play the characters that they created about me because I was hired to do their movies. Now, if I want to show a picture or an image of a Black woman that is more complex, it's going to have to come from someone who knows Black women. So that's why I write. And that's why a lot of women of color are writing and becoming skilled at it. So, because for a long time, a lot of people just thought just because they can type some words on a page, that made them a writer. But that doesn't make you a writer. Just because you're telling your own life story doesn't make you a writer. There's a skill set that comes with it. And a lot of people are being educated. Black women, period, are becoming educated in these skills so that they can tell their own stories. And we cannot depend on men to tell our stories the way we want them to be told, because there's always a skewed perception. It might be written by a man who loves women. So it's all one way, this sweet, perfect little women aren't perfect. And or it might be totally dark and a messy person that has no complexity. That's not real either. So it's not because they mean harm, it's because they just don't know. So the only way to change it, I believe, is for us to be proactive in telling our own stories. And we are doing that now, and that is the change. And it's no blame or shame or any of that. It's the same thing with white people versus other people. They're telling their stories the way they see them. And if they have people of color in their stories, they're telling it from their perspective. They don't know us. They don't live in our lives. They don't live in our bodies. So if we want to tell our stories, we got to do it. And I think that's where we're moving now.
I want to ask you about something, you know, when you mentioned the R-rated films, you know, I was watching like maybe last month an old film starring Anthony Hopkins and Anne Margaret. It was called Magic, you know, and it was on YouTube, and then it suggested like to see the making later on, you know. So I started to watch the making. This movie was done in 1978, and I think some of the people in the production, you know, they were saying that the day, you know, they wanted to shoot a love scene, you know, with Anne Margaret, a lot of people came more than usual on set. And I remember many years ago watching an interview, maybe on Jay Leno with actress Nancy Travis, you know.
Mhm.
she was complaining the same thing. She had to shoot like an intimate or love scene, you know, and more crew members came than usual. But I want to ask you, you know, about this. Is shooting a love or intimate scene is comfortable for women, you know, and or sometimes it could hurt your career later on, you know. What is your perspective on that?
Well, as you know, I mean, Mo Better Blues had a lot of intimacy in it, and I did quite a few films with that. And I was a very, if I'm going to be honest, I was a prude at the time. I was a church girl, and you know, but I'm an actress also, and I came to terms with that. And the only way that I'd say that it hurt me is that people try to force that specific kind of role on me for quite some time. It took a long time for me to break out of that stereotype of the sex symbol. So in that way, it hurt me. But also your choices can hurt you because, like for instance, I went through a phase in my career where I played gay characters over and over and over again. Like I think I had 7 or 8 roles in a row. And I was saying yes because it was work, and I'm a working actress. I'm not a quote unquote star. I'm a working actress. That's how I made my living. That's how I ate and paid my rent, was by working. But career, if I wanted to be stuck just playing those roles, then my career would go nowhere new. And I like to grow. I like to evolve in what I'm doing. So I had to start saying no to those roles, which meant no money, and which meant I had to reinvent myself again. But because I'm committed to this career for life, I was willing to evolve that way and say no. And I think that when it comes to actors getting stuck in roles, that becomes their choice because they can say no. They don't have to keep playing the same character in every movie they do. They don't have to do every love scene. They can say, you know what, this time I'm gonna say no to this. I'm gonna do something different. And that might mean I have to do an independent film, do something that's less, you know, won't be seen by as many people as soon, but at least I'm shaking it up and I'm showing them another side of me. And so they realize that, oh my gosh, not only is she pretty, not only can she be a sex symbol, but she also can act. She can be ugly if she needs to. She can be a drug addict if she needs to. She can be whatever she needs to be. A step forward to take 10 steps, or a step backward to take 10 steps forward. It's strategic. You can't do everything.
And right now, tell me about your plans for the new year, you know. But first, I want to know, how did you manage to pass by the lockdown and COVID and everything?
Well, you know, I took time off to take care of my daughter, raise my daughter, because I just didn't want. I didn't want to raise her in Hollywood because sometimes it can be very superficial, and my daughter is gorgeous, and I did not want her thinking of her looks first. I wanted her to concentrate on her character and her who she was inside. And so we left there. So I took a break. But I'm used to being an actress, a working actress. I'm used to long periods of time with nothing happening, with no work. I am not an extrovert when it comes to partying, and I don't have to be surrounded with people all the time. So when the shutdowns happen, I was very comfortable with being at home. I like being at home. It gives me opportunity to write and to do all those things that sometimes I didn't have to do because I'm running here, I'm running there. And I enjoyed that. And then there were some people that I reached out to that I hadn't talked to for a long time because I didn't have time. So in that way, I really enjoyed it. And then, but then I also lost a lot of work. I was set up to do movies. I concerts, I had a couple of television roles, all these things that I thought were gonna, okay, introducing Cynda Williams again, and those things didn't happen. So since some of those things got postponed or canceled altogether, I had to be creative and figure out something else to do besides my writing, because although I'm an introvert, I like to talk to people and I like to stay in touch. So that's why I started doing my podcast. I was speaking to my cousin, and she was talking to me about what I was going to do during this time, because we just don't know how long this is going to last and if things will ever go back to the way they were. And she suggested podcasting to me. And at first I was like, Black people don't listen to podcasts because so many of my fans are Black. She goes, well, let's educate them. So I took on the challenge, and that's how I started doing the podcast. And from that's when I started doing radio, and I found that I love it. I absolutely love doing talk radio. It's very easy for me. I don't have a problem coming up with something to say. It can be entertaining. I can even be funny. So that's what I found during this time, and that's what I'm growing with right now. It's taking my life in a different direction, and I'm having to make certain decisions because I might get offered a movie that might be some great money. No, I'm going to focus on this somewhere with some longevity. Whereas this, yay, I get a nice paycheck, and that has nothing to do with long term. So COVID, as difficult as it's been, I lost my dad during this time. He didn't die of COVID, but it definitely affected his path home, as I call it. He passed away during a time when no one could visit him in the hospital and all of that. And then I lost several friends. So when it comes to that, it was very difficult. But because I believe in the afterlife, and because I believe in God and in something more than just here, I'm sad because I miss them, but I know they're fine, and I'll be fine also. So it's been a very tumultuous time, but I've grown, and I think I'm better for it.
And you have writing plans, like a sequel to your book, correct?
Yes, yes. I've been working on that because I was so busy doing so many things. It's been hard to sit down and finish it, but most of the book is done. It's just putting the pieces together now and publishing it. So my goal is to have it by spring next year, ready to put out.
I'm telling you, I think right now you could present it as well as an audiobook, because this is very popular right now as well.
Yes, yes. I really want to do that. That's a process that I have to really nail down with my publisher, because I listen to audiobooks all the time. Because again, either podcasts or audiobooks, I'm listening when I'm cooking or I'm exercising. I'm not listening to music all the time. I'm listening to books. And so it's definitely something that I want to do. I've also had quite a few people contact me from other countries saying that they would love the book to be translated into other languages. Not sure how that happens. This is all things that I'm working on and working toward. And my French people, they're really like, when are you going to put it in French? Oh, I don't know. I'm working on it. Hispanic, Spanish language. So there's so many things I could do with the book that I have already. Eventually, though, my dream is to come to a point in my life, maybe in the next decade and a half, where I'll do a project here and there, but I'm sitting at home and I'm writing some novels, because I have stories in me that are maybe loosely based on real life, but I have entire books in my head that I want to write And so that is a goal, to get things in a position so that I can have, at least half a year to sit down and commit to writing these novels. Or one of the first of at least 3 novels that I have that I want to write.
Yes, yes, it's not something impossible. I read Gene Hackman, retired,
Mhm.
and started to become, he has books right now. He became a
Yes.
novelist, after, this long and, very colorful career, So, Cinda, I want to thank you very, very much for this interview. And I wish you all the best to your upcoming projects and to your family and your daughter. I hope we can see her in new projects in the upcoming period, something you'll
Yeah.
be proud of. And I hope also we can invite you to Egypt, in one of our film festivals. It will be a great pleasure for us.
That would also be a dream. I would love to. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate the opportunity.
My pleasure.
And it's great to meet you face to face.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks. Take care. Have a good day.
Okay. You too. Bye bye.